The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clanged against the concrete driveway at exactly 11:47 p.m. That's when I heard my wife Marta's voice drifting through our bedroom window above, crystal clear in the dead air of our sleepy upstate New York neighborhood. "I'm staying late at the office tonight. Don't expect me home." I froze under the hood of my battered Honda Civic, oil staining my work shirt. Nothing says marriage like your wife's voice echoing down the block because she can't be bothered to care who overhears her lies. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, fixing yet another problem while she was busy breaking everything we'd built over 18 years. My name's Jack Morrison, and I'm 45 years old with calloused hands and a suspicious mind. I fix computers for a living at Brennan Industries, the last decent employer left in our Rust Belt town of Millbrook. Marta runs PR for the same company, though she likes to pretend we don't know each other during business hours. Different floors, different worlds. I wiped my hands on an old rag and listened to her voice continue through the thin walls of our colonial fixer-upper. The house had been my father's before he died, and every creaking board held memories of better times. "No, Eliot. Jack's outside playing with his car again. He won't hear anything." Eliot. That name hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. Eliot Chambers, 38 years old, company golden boy with perfect teeth and a BMW that cost more than I made in 6 months. Marta's subordinate at work, though apparently not in other areas of her life. I crept closer to the house, my work boots silent on the grass. The bedroom light was on, casting shadows against the curtains. Through the gap, I could see Marta pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, wearing the red silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas, the one she claimed was too fancy for every day. "Tomorrow night works perfectly," she was saying. "The Riverside Motel on Route 9. Jack has his bowling league, so I'll have plenty of time." My hands clenched into fists. 23 years of marriage, and this is what it came to. Scheduling adultery around my Thursday night strikes and spares at Gus's Lanes. The woman I'd loved since college was treating our marriage like a minor scheduling inconvenience. I stood there in my own driveway, listening to my wife plan her betrayal, and something cold settled in my chest. Not heartbreak. That would come later. This was something sharper, more focused. This was the moment Jack Morrison, the understanding husband and reliable company man, started his transformation into something else entirely. The neighborhood was dead quiet except for the distant hum of the interstate and Mrs. Callahan's television next door. She was probably watching her late-night crime shows, never knowing she was missing the real drama happening right next door. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, but my IT background had taught me one thing: always document everything. The conversation was winding down, but I caught the tail end. "I love you too, Eliot. See you tomorrow night." Room 237, the line went dead. The bedroom light clicked off. And I stood there in the darkness, holding evidence of my wife's affair and feeling something I hadn't experienced since my boxing days 20 years ago. The cold calculation that comes right before you throw the punch that ends the fight. I finished the oil change by the light of my phone's flashlight, my movements mechanical and precise. The Honda purred to life when I turned the key, reliable as always, unlike some things in my life. Back inside, Marta was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I brushed my teeth and slipped under the covers, listening to her carefully controlled breathing. She was good at pretending. I'd give her that. But then again, she'd been practicing for months. "How was your evening?" I asked quietly. "Fine. Just tired from work. Big presentation tomorrow." Hope it goes well." "It will." "I'm very prepared." I almost laughed at that. Oh, she was prepared all right. Just not for what I had planned. The next morning started like any other Wednesday in our carefully choreographed marriage. Marta showered first. She always showered first, while I made coffee in our outdated kitchen. The morning routine was so established we barely spoke, just moved around each other like polite strangers sharing space. She came downstairs wearing her power suit, the navy blue one that made her look like she could run the world. Maybe she could. She certainly seemed to be running circles around me. "I'll be late tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes as she grabbed her travel mug. "Big client dinner." "Of course. I'll probably hit the bowling alley after work anyway." "Perfect." She kissed my cheek with lips that felt like ice. "See you later, honey." The garage door rumbled shut behind her silver Lexus, and I sat alone with my coffee and my rage. But rage without a plan is just noise, and I'd learned long ago that quiet planning beats loud emotion every time. I called in sick to work, first time in 3 years, and spent the morning doing reconnaissance. Not the dramatic movie kind with binoculars and telephoto lenses, but the boring, methodical kind that actually works. I drove to the Riverside Motel and confirmed it existed. Checked the layout, the parking situation, the sightlines. Room 237 was on the second floor, accessible by external stairs, with a clear view from the parking lot. Then I came home and did what I do best. I got into computers. Marta had left her laptop on the kitchen counter, plugged in and charging. She always forgot to close it properly, a habit that used to seem endearing. Now it felt like providence. Her email was still logged in. Gmail, personal account, the one she used for private correspondence. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for exactly 3 seconds. Then I started reading. The affair had been going on for 4 months. 4 months of working late and client dinners and weekend conferences. The emails between Marta and Eliot were explicit enough to make me nauseous and detailed enough to hold up in court. They talked about me like I was a piece of furniture, boring, functional, easily ignored. One email from Eliot particularly stood out. "Your husband seems like a decent guy, but God, those work shirts are depressing. How do you stand it?" Marta's response: "Jack's sweet, but he's got no ambition. He's content fixing other people's problems instead of solving his own. It's like being married to a very reliable janitor." I sat back in my chair and laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. A reliable janitor. After 23 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, and countless nights of supporting her career moves and social ambitions, I was a reliable janitor. Well, this reliable janitor was about to show them both what problem-solving really looked like. I forwarded the entire email thread to myself, then did something that would have made my old boxing coach proud. I went for the knockout punch. I created a group email with Marta's work address, HR, her boss, and 3 of her closest colleagues. In the subject line, I wrote, "Personal communication, please review." Then I hit send. The read receipts started coming in within minutes. First HR, then her boss, then the colleagues. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Callahan next door. "Saw Marta's car outside the Motel 6 this morning. Everything okay over there? Wrong motel, but close enough." In a town like Millbrook, gossip travels faster than wildfire, and Mrs. Callahan was the town's unofficial news network. I texted back, "Thanks for letting me know. I'll look into it." Within an hour, my phone was ringing. Marta calling from work. "Jack, what the hell did you do?" "Good morning to you too, dear. How's that big presentation going?" "Don't play dumb with me. HR wants to see me in 20 minutes. My boss is asking questions." "What did you do?" I could hear the panic in her voice, the careful control starting to crack. It was a beautiful sound. "I didn't do anything, Marta. I just shared some information. Isn't that what good husbands do? Share?" The line went dead. I smiled and poured myself another cup of coffee. Round 1 to the reliable janitor. But I wasn't done. Not even close. By 6 p.m., I was parked across the street from the Riverside Motel with a thermos of coffee and a clear view of the parking lot. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a roadside motel: neon sign with half the letters burned out, cracked asphalt, and the kind of discretion that comes with not asking too many questions. Marta's Lexus pulled in at 6:47 p.m., followed 3 minutes later by Eliot's silver BMW. They parked at opposite ends of the lot, like that would somehow make it less obvious. Amateur hour. I watched them meet at the base of the stairs, saw Eliot's hand on the small of Marta's back as they climbed to the second floor. Room 237, just like she'd said. The reliable janitor had been listening. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter Amelia, away at college. Mom says you're having problems. Are you guys getting divorced? I stared at the message for a long moment. 22 years old, smart as a whip, and already Marta was working the angles, controlling the narrative, getting ahead of the story before I could tell my side. I texted back, Your mother and I are working through some issues. Don't worry about it. Focus on your studies. Dad, I'm not 12. What's really going on? I'll call you this weekend. We'll talk then. I put the phone away and focused on the motel room. The curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving behind them. My wife of 23 years and her boy toy, probably laughing about the reliable janitor who was too stupid to see what was happening under his own nose. That's when I decided to give them something real to laugh about. I got out of my car and walked across the street. The BMW was parked under a streetlight, pristine and perfect, like everything else in Eliot's carefully curated life. I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side door, leaving a long, deep scratch in the metallic paint. Then I did the passenger side for good measure. But I wasn't done. In my jacket pocket, I had a condom I'd bought at the gas station, still in the wrapper. I tore it open, stretched it over the BMW's antenna, and tied it off like a balloon. Then I took a photo with my phone. Childish? Absolutely. Satisfying? You bet. I was walking back to my car when the motel room door opened. Eliot stepped out, probably going to the ice machine or the vending area. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, looking like he'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Our eyes met across the parking lot. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Him in his designer clothes, me in my work shirt and jeans, the golden boy and the reliable janitor. Then I smiled and gave him a little wave. Eliot's face went white. He fumbled for his phone, probably calling Marta. I could see him gesturing frantically toward the parking lot, toward me. A minute later, the curtains in room 237 moved slightly. I got in my car and drove home, leaving them to discover the artwork on the BMW. My phone started ringing before I'd gone 2 blocks. Marta, calling in a panic. I let it go to voicemail. The message was exactly what I expected. Jack, this is insane. You can't just show up places and vandalize people's property. Call me back right now. I saved the message and went home to wait. The evening news was on, something about the mayor's budget proposal, but I wasn't really watching. I was planning. Mrs. Callahan knocked on my door around 9 p.m., carrying a casserole dish and wearing her concerned neighbor expression. Jack, honey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right? I saw Marta leave early this morning and she looked upset. Mrs. Callahan was 73 years old with silver hair and the sharpest eyes in Millbrook. She'd lived next door for 15 years and had appointed herself the neighborhood's unofficial guardian. Usually, I found her nosiness annoying. Tonight, it felt like opportunity. We're having some marriage troubles, Mrs. Callahan. I found out Marta's been seeing someone from work. Her eyes widened. Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. That explains why I've been seeing that fancy car around the neighborhood at odd hours. Fancy car? Silver BMW. I thought maybe you'd gotten a promotion. She paused, studying my face. But that wasn't you driving it, was it? No, ma'am. That would be Eliot Chambers from Marta's office. Mrs. Callahan's expression hardened. She'd been married for 47 years before her husband died, and she had strong opinions about marriage vows. Well, she said, I suppose the whole neighborhood should know what kind of people they're dealing with. I accepted the casserole with appropriate gratitude and watched her march back to her house with purpose in her step. By tomorrow morning, half of Millbrook would know about Marta's affair. The other half would know by lunchtime. Marta came home at 11:30 p.m., slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. I was sitting in my recliner, watching the late news and eating Mrs. Callahan's tuna casserole. "We need to talk," she said. "Sure. How was your client dinner?" Her face flushed red. "Cut the act, Jack. You know exactly where I was." "Do I?" "Because according to your story, you were having dinner with clients. Are you telling me you lied?" She stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. The smart play would have been to come clean, apologize, try to work things out. But Marta had never been one to back down from a fight. "Fine," she said. "Yes, I'm seeing Eliot. Yes, we were at the motel tonight. And yes, I know you were there watching us like some kind of stalker. Stalker seems harsh. I prefer concerned husband. This marriage has been over for years, Jack. We both know it. I just had the courage to do something about it." I set down my fork and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd fallen in love with in college, who'd worn my ring for over 2 decades, who'd raised my children and shared my bed and promised to love me until death do us part. "You're right," I said. "This marriage is over. But courage? That's not what I'd call it." She turned and walked upstairs without another word. I heard the bedroom door slam, then the lock click. I finished my casserole and started planning phase 2. The PR agency's annual client appreciation event was held every October at the Millbrook Country Club, a stuffy affair with rubber chicken dinners and speeches about synergy and moving forward together. As Marta's husband, I'd been invited to these things for years, usually standing around making small talk while she worked the room like a politician. This year was going to be different. The event was scheduled for Friday night, 2 days after the motel incident. Marta had barely spoken to me since our confrontation, communicating only through terse notes left on the kitchen counter. She was staying late at work, probably trying to do damage control after my email blast, and sleeping in the guest room. Fine by me. It made planning easier. I spent Thursday evening at Gus's Lanes, my usual bowling league night. The guys knew something was up. I was throwing strikes like a machine and barely talking between frames. Gus himself, a 70-year-old ex-Marine who'd run the place for 30 years, pulled me aside during the break. "You want to talk about whatever's eating you, Morrison?" "Wife troubles," I said, chalking my fingers. "The cheating kind or the nagging kind?" "The cheating kind." Gus nodded slowly. He'd been through 2 divorces himself and had opinions about unfaithful spouses that couldn't be repeated in polite company. "You got proof?" "Enough to sink a battleship." "Good. Proof's important." "What are you going to do about it?" I looked around the bowling alley, the faded carpet, the ancient scoring system, the smell of cigarettes and beer that had soaked into everything over the decades. This place was real, honest. No pretense, no games, just people being exactly who they were. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with," I said. Gus grinned. "Sounds like a plan. Need any help?" "Just keep the beer cold." "I'll probably need one when this is over." Friday night arrived with all the pomp and circumstance the Millbrook Country Club could muster. I wore my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for my son's graduation, and arrived fashionably late. The cocktail hour was in full swing, with Brennan Industries' finest schmoozing potential clients and patting each other on the back. Marta was holding court near the bar, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She looked stunning, confident, completely in her element. Eliot was across the room, playing it cool, pretending they barely knew each other. I grabbed a scotch and made my rounds, shaking hands and making small talk with people I'd known for years. Everyone was polite, but I could see the questions in their eyes. Word of the email incident had spread through the company like wildfire, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The dinner portion of the evening went smoothly enough. I sat at the spouse's table, making conversation with the other corporate wives and husbands, while Marta worked the VIP section. The speeches began around 9 p.m., the usual corporate cheerleading about growth and opportunity and bright futures ahead. That's when I made my move. The country club's AV system was older than dirt, still using overhead projectors and laptop connections that belonged in a museum. During the break between speakers, I approached the tech booth and introduced myself to the kid running the equipment. "Jack Morrison, IT department at Brennan. Mind if I take a look at your setup?" I might be able to help with that connectivity issue. The kid, probably a college student making weekend money, was happy to let the expert take over. I plugged in my laptop and pulled up the PowerPoint presentation I'd spent all day preparing. When Marta was introduced as the next speaker, she walked to the podium with confidence, probably planning to give her usual speech about family values and corporate culture. She'd given variations of this talk a dozen times before, always with me, in the audience as the supportive husband. Tonight, I was supporting her in a different way. She clicked the remote to advance to her first slide, and the projector screen lit up with the email thread between her and Eliot. Every explicit message, every plan to meet at the motel, every casual insult about her reliable janitor husband. The room went dead silent. Marta stared at the screen in horror, clicking the remote frantically, but I'd locked the presentation. The next slide was even better, screenshots of their text messages, complete with timestamps showing they were sent during work hours. "Technical difficulties," I called out from my table. Sometimes technology reveals more than we intended. The crowd was buzzing now, a mix of gasps and nervous laughter. Eliot was trying to disappear into his chair, his face bright red. Marta's boss looked like he was having a stroke. Marta finally found her voice. This is a private matter that has no place." But the damage was done. Half the room was pulling out their phones, probably taking pictures or texting the gossip to friends who weren't there. The other half was staring at Marta like she'd grown a second head. I stood up and walked to the front of the room, taking the microphone from her trembling hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. As you can see, my wife has been working very closely with her colleagues at Brennan Industries. Some might say too closely." I looked directly at Eliot. "But I believe in transparency, especially when it comes to family values." The room erupted. People were talking, laughing, pointing. Marta fled toward the exit, Eliot close behind her. Her boss was already on his phone, probably calling an emergency meeting for Monday morning. I handed the microphone back to the club's event coordinator and walked out into the parking lot, where Marta was waiting by her car. "You bastard," she said, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do that to me?" "The same way you could do what you did to me. The only difference is, I did it in public." She slapped me hard across the face, the sound echoing off the country club's brick facade. Then she got in her car and drove away, leaving me standing alone under the parking lot lights. I touched my cheek where she'd hit me and smiled. It was worth it, but I wasn't done yet, not even close. The fallout from the country club incident was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, Marta had been placed on administrative leave pending an HR investigation. Eliot was transferred to a different department, a lateral move that everyone knew was really a demotion. The company gossip mill was working overtime, and I was suddenly the most popular guy in the IT department. But something didn't feel right. I was sitting in my cubicle pretending to work on a server upgrade while actually monitoring the company's internal messaging system when I noticed something odd. The rumors about Marta's affair were spreading too efficiently, too systematically. Someone was feeding the gossip machine, and it wasn't just Mrs. Callahan's neighborhood network. That's when I remembered the note. After the country club disaster, I'd found a folded piece of paper under my windshield wiper. "You're playing checkers, honey. We're playing chess. -B-B Bree Hartwell, Marta's best friend since college and her closest confidant at work. Bree was 44, divorced, and worked in the company's marketing department. She'd been to our house countless times over the years, had stood up in our wedding, was godmother to our daughter Amelia. Bree, who I'd gotten fired from her previous job 5 years ago for embezzling petty cash. The pieces started falling into place like tumblers in a lock. I pulled up the company directory and cross-referenced Bree's access logs with the timeline of Marta's affair. She'd been working late the same nights Marta claimed to be at client dinners. Her keycard showed access to conference rooms during off hours, perfect for private phone calls. I hacked into Marta's phone records, not proud of it but desperate times and all that. The number she'd been calling most frequently wasn't Eliot's. It was Bree's. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper. Email metadata, deleted text messages recovered from backup servers, security camera footage from the parking garage showing Bree and Marta in intense conversations. The picture that emerged was ugly and complicated. Bree hadn't just known about the affair, she'd orchestrated it. I found the smoking gun in a deleted email thread between Bree and Eliot, recovered from the server backup. The first message was dated 6 months ago. Eliot, I have a proposition that could benefit both of us. Jack Morrison destroyed my career 5 years ago with his ethical concerns about my expense reports. Now I want to return the favor. His wife is vulnerable, unhappy, looking for excitement. You're ambitious and charming. I think we can help each other. The reply, what exactly are you suggesting? Seduce his wife. Make him look like a fool. I'll handle the details. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The affair wasn't about Marta falling out of love with me or finding someone better. It was about Bree's revenge for something that had happened half a decade ago. Marta and Eliot were just pawns in a game I didn't even know I was playing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Lakeside Estate, Saturday night. Come alone if you want answers. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing file of evidence. Then I called in sick for the rest of the week and started planning the endgame. The Lakeside Estate belonged to Richard Hawthorne, a wealthy developer who'd made his fortune buying up distressed properties around Millbrook and turning them into luxury condos. He was also, according to my research, Bree's new boyfriend, a relationship that had started conveniently around the time she began orchestrating my wife's affair. Saturday night was clear and cold, with a full moon reflecting off the lake's dark surface. The estate sat on 20 acres of prime waterfront property, all glass and steel and architectural pretension. Cars were parked along the circular driveway. Expensive cars belonging to expensive people having an expensive party. I parked on the road and walked up the driveway, my footsteps crunching on imported gravel. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the party in progress. Cocktail dresses and business suits, crystal glasses and silver trays, the kind of gathering where everyone was networking even while pretending to have fun. Marta was there, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. Eliot was across the room, still playing it cool, and Bree was holding court by the fireplace, laughing and gesturing with a wine glass in her hand. I walked through the unlocked front door like I owned the place. The conversation died as I entered the main room. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me, the scorned husband crashing the party where his wife and her lover were guests. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Jack," Bree said, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. "How nice of you to join us. Though I don't recall seeing your name on the guest list." "That's okay," I said, pulling out my phone. I brought my own entertainment. I'd spent the week preparing for this moment, compiling every piece of evidence into a multimedia presentation that would make the country club incident look like amateur hour. Emails, text messages, phone records, security footage, financial records showing payments from Bree to Eliot, everything. I connected my phone to the estate's sound system. Rich people always have the best tech, and hit play. Bree's voice filled the room, crystal clear through the premium speakers. Jack Morrison destroyed my career 5 years ago with his ethical concerns about my expense reports. Now I want to return the favor. The room went silent. Bree's face went white. Marta stared at her best friend like she was seeing her for the first time. The recording continued, laying out the entire conspiracy in Bree's own words. How she'd manipulated Marta into the affair, coached Eliot on exactly what to say and do, orchestrated every meeting and every lie. How the whole thing had been about revenge against me, with my wife as collateral damage. "You used me," Marta whispered, staring at Bree in horror. "Marta, let me explain." But Marta was already moving, crossing the room with murder in her eyes. She grabbed Bree by the shoulders and shook her hard enough to spill wine all over that expensive dress. "You destroyed my marriage for revenge? You made me betray my husband because you got fired for stealing?" The party guests were backing away now, sensing violence in the air. Eliot was trying to disappear into the crowd, but I wasn't done with him yet. "And you," I said, pointing at him. "You were happy to play along as it got you ahead at work. How's that working out for you now?" Eliot opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could he say? The evidence was overwhelming. The truth was out, and his reputation was destroyed. Richard Hawthorne, the estate's owner, was staring at Bree like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "Get out," he said quietly. "All of you. Get out of my house," but I wasn't leaving yet. I had one more card to play. "Actually, Richard, you might want to check your bank accounts. Bree's been quite creative with your credit cards lately." I played the final recording, Bree bragging to someone on the phone about how easy it was to manipulate rich men, how she was bleeding Richard dry while planning her exit strategy. The look on his face was worth the price of admission. The party ended abruptly after that. Guests fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving just the main players standing in the wreckage of Bree's grand plan. Marta was crying, Eliot was hyperventilating, and Bree was staring at me with pure hatred. "You think you've won," she said, "but you've lost everything too. Your wife, your marriage, your reputation." "My wife was never really mine if she could be manipulated so easily," I said. "My marriage was built on lies, and my reputation, well, let's see how that plays out." I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final shot. "Oh, and Bree? Next time you want to destroy someone's life, make sure you're not creating a paper trail that leads back to you. It's a rookie mistake." I left them there in that glass house, surrounded by the wreckage of their schemes, and drove home to plan the final act of this long, ugly drama. 2 weeks later, Millbrook's annual Harvest Festival was in full swing at Riverside Park. The whole town turned out for this event. Families with kids, teenagers showing off, seniors playing cards at picnic tables, local politicians glad-handing voters. It was Norman Rockwell America, complete with apple cider and pumpkin displays. I'd been planning this moment since the night at the lakeside estate, waiting for the perfect opportunity to address my entire community at once. The festival's open mic session was scheduled for 2 p.m., right when the crowd would be at its peak. Marta had moved out of our house the day after the party, taking only her clothes and personal items. She was staying with her sister across town, probably trying to figure out how to rebuild her shattered life. Eliot had been quietly let go from Brennan Industries, officially a restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Bree had disappeared entirely, probably to another city where her reputation hadn't preceded her. But I wasn't satisfied with their quiet exile. I wanted the whole town to understand exactly what had happened and why. I arrived at the park early, wearing my best casual clothes and carrying a manila folder full of documentation. The festival was already crowded, with the smell of kettle corn and the sound of children laughing filling the crisp October air. Mrs. Callahan waved at me from the church booth, where she was selling homemade pies for charity. The open mic was set up near the bandstand, with a decent sound system that would carry across most of the park. I signed up for a slot and waited my turn, watching families enjoy their Saturday afternoon while I prepared to drop a bomb on their peaceful small-town gathering. At 2:15, the festival coordinator called my name. "Next up, we have Jack Morrison with a community announcement." I walked to the microphone, looking out over the crowd of familiar faces. These were my neighbors, my coworkers, people I'd known for years. They deserved to know the truth about what had been happening in their midst. Good afternoon, everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Jack Morrison. I work at Brennan Industries. I've lived in Millbrook for over 20 years. I'm here today to tell you a story about betrayal, manipulation, and revenge. The crowd was paying attention now, sensing something significant was about to happen. I could see Marta's sister in the distance, probably texting frantically to warn her that I was about to go public. 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife Marta was having an affair with a coworker named Eliot Chambers. That was painful enough. But what I learned later was much worse. The affair was orchestrated by Marta's best friend, Bree Hartwell, as revenge against me for getting her fired 5 years ago for embezzling company funds. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I had their full attention now. Bree manipulated my wife into betraying our marriage, coached her lover on exactly how to seduce her, and planned every detail of their deception. She turned my wife into a weapon against me, destroying a 23-year marriage for the sake of petty revenge. I pulled out the folder and held it up. I have documentation of everything: emails, text messages, financial records, recorded conversations. The affair wasn't about love or passion or even unhappiness. It was about one woman's desire to hurt me by destroying the person I loved most. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I could see shock, sympathy, and anger on the faces staring back at me. But here's the thing about revenge. It has a way of consuming everyone it touches. Marta lost her career and her marriage. Eliot lost his job and his reputation. Bree lost her new boyfriend and her place in this community. And I lost my faith in the people I trusted most. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm telling you this because I want everyone in Millbrook to understand what happened here. When someone you trust betrays you, when they use your love as a weapon against you, it changes something fundamental about who you are. I used to be the kind of man who fixed problems quietly, who kept his head down and his mouth shut. But that man was weak, and weakness invites predators. The crowd was completely still, even the children seeming to sense the gravity of the moment. So I became something else. I became the kind of man who fights back, who exposes lies, who makes sure that actions have consequences. Some of you might call that revenge. I call it justice. That's when I saw them, Marta and Eliot, standing at the edge of the crowd. They'd probably come to the festival separately, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in their shattered lives. Now they were trapped, unable to leave without making a scene, forced to listen as I laid out their sins for the entire town to judge. Marta Morrison and Eliot Chambers are in this crowd today, I continued, gesturing toward them. They're probably hoping this will all blow over, that people will forget, that they can rebuild their reputations and move on with their lives. The crowd turned to look at them, 1,000 eyes focusing on the adulteress and her lover. Marta's face was bright red with shame and anger. Eliot looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. But I want everyone to remember this story. I want you to remember that actions have consequences, that betrayal has a price, and that sometimes the quiet guy in the corner is the one you should fear most. Marta started pushing through the crowd toward the microphone, her face twisted with rage. That's enough, Jack. You've humiliated us enough. Have I? I asked, not backing down from the microphone. Because I'm just getting started. She reached the stage and tried to grab the microphone from me, but I held on tight. The crowd was buzzing now, sensing a confrontation. You want to do this here? I asked her. In front of everyone? Fine. Let's talk about how you spent 4 months lying to my face, how you scheduled your adultery around my bowling league, how you and your friends laughed about my pathetic work shirts while you were destroying our marriage. I was unhappy, she screamed. I felt trapped. You never listened to me, never tried to understand what I needed. What you needed was integrity, I shot back. What you needed was the courage to ask for a divorce instead of sneaking around like a teenager. What you needed was to be a better person than the one standing in front of me right now. Eliot had worked his way through the crowd and was now standing next to Marta, probably thinking he needed to defend her honor. Too little, too late. "This is harassment," he said, his voice shaking. "You're obsessed, Jack. You need help." I laughed, actually laughed, at the absurdity of it. I need help? I'm not the one who helped destroy a marriage for a promotion. I'm not the one who was stupid enough to get manipulated by a woman with a grudge, and I'm sure as hell not the one who's going to spend the rest of his life known as the guy who got played by Bree Hartwell. That hit home. Eliot's face went white as he realized that his reputation in this town was permanently destroyed, that he would always be remembered as the fool who got used in someone else's revenge scheme. The crowd was completely engaged now, watching the drama unfold like it was better than any movie. Someone was probably recording it on their phone, which meant it would be on social media within the hour. Perfect. "You know what the funny thing is?" I continued, addressing the crowd again. "I actually feel sorry for them. Marta spent 23 years married to a man who loved her, and she threw it away for someone who was just using her. Eliot thought he was seducing his boss's wife, but really he was just a puppet in someone else's show. They're both victims of Bree Hartwell's manipulation." I looked directly at Marta. "But being a victim doesn't excuse becoming a perpetrator. You still made the choice to betray your marriage. You still chose to lie to my face every day for 4 months. You still chose to mock me behind my back while I was supporting your career and loving you unconditionally." Tears were streaming down her face now, but I wasn't done. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm filing for divorce on Monday morning. I'm keeping the house, since it was my father's and your name was never on the deed. I'm keeping the pension and the savings account, since adultery voids your claim to marital assets in New York State. And I'm keeping my dignity, which is something you'll never be able to say." I turned back to the crowd for my closing statement. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention today. I hope you've learned something valuable about trust, betrayal, and the importance of choosing your friends carefully. And remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." I handed the microphone back to the festival coordinator and walked off the stage, leaving Marta and Eliot standing there in front of 1,000 judgmental stares. The crowd was buzzing with conversation, everyone talking at once about what they'd just witnessed. Mrs. Callahan intercepted me near the pie booth, her eyes shining with approval. "That was quite a speech, Jack." "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan." I thought it was time everyone knew the truth. "Oh, they know it now. This will be the talk of the town for years to come." She paused, studying my face. "How do you feel?" I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? Vindicated? Satisfied? Empty? Free, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel free. I walked home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, leaving behind the festival and the drama and the wreckage of my old life. Tomorrow I would start over, but tonight I would sit in my father's house and enjoy the silence of a job well done. Behind me I could hear the festival continuing, the music and laughter and conversation of a community that would never look at marriage and betrayal quite the same way again. And somewhere in that crowd, Marta and Eliot were learning what it meant to face the consequences of their choices. I had been the reliable janitor, the understanding husband, the quiet man who fixed problems without making a fuss. But sometimes the world needs a different kind of man, the kind who fights back, who demands justice, who makes sure that betrayal comes with a price. I had become that man, and I had no regrets. Bets, 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 bets.